Bruce Springsteen Live provides fans with an intimate look into Springsteen's creative process. The Bruce Springsteen Live exhibit opens at the Woody Guthrie Center on Saturday, April 16th, running through Sunday, September 25th. The exhibit will feature iconic artifacts, live performance footage, instruments, stage costumes, exclusive interviews, concert posters, and photography, as well as unique interactive displays to immerse fans in Bruce Springsteen and the band's creative process. More information can be found at woodyguthrieCenter.org. Please let them know that Set Listing Bruce sent you there, and I'll see you in Tulsa.
The ability to kind of use places as a way to kind of show what is happening for the people who are there, and kind of, I think in his case, a lot of the time, the hopelessness of the people in those spaces, that to me, I think is what I really connected with. And like, I love, the more like upbeat kind of cheesy stuff. But for me, when I am like, I want to listen to Bruce, it's usually I'm putting on Nebraska, or, I have a select few other songs that are like my go-tos, because I just really appreciate that kind of the length, really, I think his lyrics in a lot of them.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me today from the Midwest, where it is much colder than it is in Dallas, my new friend, Mackensi. Hi, Mackensi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Oh, I am so excited too. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Mackensi. I am very Midwestern. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I did my undergraduate degree at Eastern Michigan University, and now I am in Illinois doing my master's degree. So very much a Midwestern kid at heart.
What are you working on for your master's?
I am getting my master's of education in curriculum and instruction.
Oh, very nice. Cool. So Columbus, one of my co-partner that does the Doctor Who podcast is there in Columbus. So I've visited there a couple of times. So a fun place to grow up. Why education? Why did you decide to pursue that?
So it's been a wild ride, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
So my mom worked in social services. She's a nurse for adults with disabilities. So initially my undergraduate degree was in special education. Okay. I wasn't a huge fan of it, but my undergraduate institution, if you did special ed, you also could either do like elementary education as well, or do a subject area for secondary ed. So I ended up minoring in English and writing. And I liked that a lot. So my work now in graduate school focuses a lot on literacies, non-traditional literacies. So just not just reading and writing, but things like music. Bruce kind of ties into that a little bit, actually.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, growing up in Columbus, what kind of music did your family listen to?
A lot, everything. That's, I think, one of in retrospect, I was exposed to quite a bit of music. Both my parents were Prince fans. We listened to so much Prince, not the most appropriate thing for a kid to be listening to. But we did. I have apparently, one of my aunts said she has a very vivid memory of me singing Black Sweat in a car seat. So it's yeah, good times.
I love that.
I also loved 90s rap. I listened to a lot of Tupac, Biggie, that type of stuff, which exposed me, I think, to soul music because through the sampling type of stuff.
Sure.
And just like general pop music, like top 40 stuff was on all the time, and 80s, 90s contemporary type radio stations.
So as we're recording this, it's just a couple of days after the Super Bowl. Did you enjoy the halftime show?
I really did. I was a fan. I was real skeptical going
Yeah.
into it. I actually think it was really good. One of my favorites in a few years.
Yeah, my son is 32, and he was over at the house. We were watching it, and he was like, Dad, they are speaking to my, junior high and high school experience. I mean, yeah, he loved every song. He was singing along. He was just in heaven.
Yeah, I loved it. I'm 25, so
Yeah,
like I was a little past my time, but I do
yeah,
remember hearing, I mean,
yeah,
Snoop and Dre and stuff
yeah.
as a young kid. So I was also living my best life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and and I enjoyed it too. I just loved all the energy and the excitement. So that's funny you did. So you're how did you discover Bruce, and what about him spoke to you?
Yeah, I think through phases like a lot of people do through their music.
Sure.
So when I was a younger teen, I was into like the Beatles, the Beach Boys, like the 60s bands. As I got into an older teenager, I kind of branched out more. And then by the time I was in my 20s, I was like very much into the soul music. But it was also around that time that I found Bruce. Like, I mean, I knew who Bruce Springsteen was, right?
Sure.
I knew the hits. I think maybe I had some stereotypes of like the type of people who listen to Bruce Springsteen. I mean, it definitely wasn't like my crowd, right? Um, but and people are still surprised when they find out I'm like more than just a casual Bruce Springsteen fan. Like, what is this 20-something-year-old like black kid from Ohio? Like, why are they listening to Bruce Springsteen? But I think for me, when I was in college and I was starting to get into like critical analysis of education and I was building like those type of like systems in college, I think I think it was Born in the USA, and I like heard it one day and I was like, oh, like this is what this song is about. Like, oh my gosh, like it was, I think, kind of an awakening for me. And I think that for me, understanding kind of Bruce was telling stories about people and places, right? And as a someone who grew up in the Midwest, especially I think in Columbus, which has really only recently grown in the like within my lifetime, it was definitely the border of like rural and
Sure.
urban.
Yeah.
I think his music really captures like that experience. And yeah, I think it offered for me as someone who was interested in like working with kids on analyzing things like sound or art. His music was like the perfect thing to kind of help me do that myself and really kind of assess where I had come from.
Yeah, that's I love that answer, and you're right. In fact, I sent out an email earlier this year to everyone who'd ever been a guest, and I said, my I love all my guests, but my guests have skewed older white guys. I mean, I've had a few. I've had certainly passionate Springs female fans. I've had young fans, but the majority of. And so I said, I'm specifically looking for, a more diverse. And even if they're not Bruce fans, I would love to have, a more diversity because the podcast as it's grown, I think it's grown into more just a music discussion podcast. And if that, so yeah, so I was thrilled when you reached out and said, hey, yeah, I'm a big fan. And so thank you. This was wonderful. As someone who intellectually studies music and storytelling, what are some examples of where you go, oh, I see what Bruce is doing there, or something that surprised you? Not just, I mean, we all can be moved by the emotion of some of his songs, but if you can back yourself up as an academic, is there something that kind of speaks to you and smile? And I see you're smiling, so.
Yeah, I always like, I feel like as someone who like somewhat studied
Yeah,
literature in college, he reminds me a lot of John Steinbeck
yeah,
in how he captures like the landscape a lot in his music.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I think he did, I think, a song that was about Tom Joad from the
Right.
Grapes
Exactly.
of Wrath.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
like,
he did.
yeah. And so for me, I think the ability to kind of use places as a way to kind of show what is happening for the people who are there, and kind of, I think in his case, a lot of the time, the hopelessness of the people in those spaces, that to me, I think is what I really connected with. And like, I love, the more like upbeat kind of cheesy stuff too.
Sure.
But for me, when I am like, I want to listen to Bruce, it's usually I'm putting on Nebraska, or I have a select few other songs that are like my go-tos.
Yeah.
Because I just really appreciate that kind of the length, really, I think his lyrics, in a lot of them.
It's partially a cliche, but there's, just as all cliches, there's truth in it. A lot of young people, if I do that general, quote unquote, will find Nebraska and go, oh, wait, this is the Born in the USA guy. Oh, wait, this is Born to Run guy. And, and then kind of give this different things. I think Western Stars is a collection of Elmore Leonard short stories, right? Like the guy who wrote Justified and all this stuff, because they do feel like they were set in the West, and there's this, it feels like an album of short stories.
Yeah.
And so, and so does Nebraska. Right. And I goes to Tom Joad the same way. And I think it's interesting how he can weave that story and weave that imagery. And I've had people join me that talk about how cinematic his music is, that you can see that film in your mind.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite songs of his is actually Racing in the Street. And like that song to me definitely is cinematic. And it's like my favorite song to listen to when I'm walking home from class and it's dark. It just really like captures the vibe, especially I think there's the verse where he says she sits on the porch of her daddy's house, but all her pretty dreams are torn. She stares off alone into the night with the eyes of one who hates for just being born. That's like one of my favorite lines probably in his entire discography.
Well, Mackenzie, you mentioned how you went through a phase of the Beatles and the Beach Boys. So when I graduated high school way back in the dark ages in 1977, I found a Beach Boys 8-track and fell in love with the Beach Boys, and just went through every album I could find, every cassette, every 8-track, every album. Me too. just Brian Wilson's magic and that beauty. And so then when I picked up Born to Run, and all of a sudden Racing in the Street was like an adult Beach Boy song. I mean, it's about cars. A great way to describe it. It's about cars, it's about racing, but it's wild away from Little Deuce Cooper, fun. And just, you can, at least I can, connect the two. And it is like the other side of the beauty and the fun and everything of California, to that dark side of, well, what if you like the Harrison Ford character in American Graffiti almost, right? Like that. Sure. He's now aged a little bit, and it's doing that. So have you had a chance to see him perform live?
I haven't. This is like the pandemic happened, right?
Yes, like exactly.
The past 2 years of my life. I haven't been to a concert in literal years. But I would love to see him live. I love a lot of his live albums. And I think me and my friends are getting into him as well. So I would love for all of us to be able to go to a concert. It'd be so fun.
Well, I had 2 fans this summer, both about your age, right around the same, late teens, middle 20s. And both of them had never seen Bruce, had discovered him and got lucky enough to see him in Broadway. and that was their first show. And they were like, I can't believe they're finally seeing, but they're anxious, like we all are, for another tour. So in your little note, you're into me. All your friends are, in their middle 20s. Are you encouraging them to listen to Bruce? Or are you this evangelist going out there preaching the magic and power of the E Street Band?
So this is actually, this has been, I think, one of the good parts of the pandemic, is because we couldn't see each other, because I was living at home, they were living at home with their parents, they lived in Michigan, I lived in Ohio. It was, we were all kind of spread out, and so we were looking for things to be able to do virtually. And we started an album club where we, like, every week we choose like 3 to 5 albums, we listen to them throughout the week, and then we have like a Zoom meeting and talk about them. And I think the first
so that's a podcast. That is, I'm telling you right now, you tell your team you're going to record them, you send me the MP3 and I will send that out, because that sounds like a hell of a podcast.
It's really funny. I am really into music history. Like I have a good grasp of it. My other friend, Nolan, he also has, like, he's more contemporary music, but as far as like the contemporary landscape, he can do it. Our other friend was not even born in America. So a lot of this stuff is the first time she's hearing it. I think the first Bruce album I think we listened to Born to Run. I think that was the first one we listened to. And she came on and she's like, this is so sparkly. That's what she described it as. She's like, this is sparkly rock. And I was like, that's not what I would say, but like, yeah, you're not wrong. Like,
that's great.
I think it was pretty immediate. Like, I think once they sat down and just like listened, they were like, oh, I get it. Like, I get it 100%.
And I think that works both ways. I saw a few people grumbling about the halftime show that we were just talking about, and I posted on both in Twitter and on Facebook, like, the people performed have almost 50 Grammys between them. I mean, you don't like that kind of music, great, but don't try to say that this isn't, this is now mainstream, this is good. And I think it's very quickly to go, oh, that's teenage music, or that's old man music, versus if you listen to it, you with open ears, you go, holy crap, there is a reason why people say that albums from Prince or Eminem or Tupac or Bruce Springsteen speak to them, because there is that universal truths in that music.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, some of our favorite albums are like not even, you would look at them and be like, what is your taste? Like, I don't know where we're going, because like we all love Bruce Springsteen. We also love Bob Dylan. We like the Notorious B.I.G. was like one of our favorite albums we listened to, because I think when you do like sit down and just listen, I think you'd be surprised. I mean, I teach 2 classes here at the University of Illinois. One of them is School and Society. So we talk a lot about, history, current issues, current political issues. And I played for them some older music, and they were like, whoa, I think it was What's Going On and Living for the City by Stevie Wonder. And they were listening to them. And then we got done and they were just like, how old is this song? I was like, oh, it's like 50 years old. And they were like, what? They were like, this is so relevant. Like, it sounds like it could have been written yesterday. So I think, it's just like, you have to, I agree with you. It's just like, when you sit down, listen to it, take it in, I think people would be surprised how much they actually do like.
So I just had an audience, I just last week released an episode where Stephen Malio joined me, and he's a professor at a small college, and he teaches Greek and myths. And he did a whole episode when he compared Homer's Iliad to Springsteen on Broadway. about the structure. It
Yeah.
talks about Bruce leaving town, and Homer, Ulysses is leaving town and then returning, and then all this stuff. And because there's universal truths in that.
Hmm.
I think that's I think if you think American Skin 41 Shots, was 98, 99, and it is just as relevant today,
Yeah.
sadly, as it
Hmm.
is. Yeah. That, and it is, you sometimes worry, or not worry, but you're like, how can something that Dylan wrote, or, these other artists write, that 50 years later are still relevant? And at the time they were just trying to make a record that goes on the radio.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was like, for me, listening to a lot when I was first getting into Bruce and like going through his discography. I think that was what was hit me, because these songs, I mean, I think of like Mansion on the Hill from Nebraska, or
Yeah.
The River, right? These songs that like like almost like they were written for like me and like the peer group I had, because of
Yeah.
where we were growing up. And yeah, I mean, you drive 15 minutes outside of Columbus and it is like abandoned factories and farm fields.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
and it's yeah, it's just it was like, why do I relate to this so much? But then when I really sat down and thought about it, I was like, oh, because I lived a lot of what he was talking about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a universal to it. How else? You mentioned you do two classes. What's your other class, and do you incorporate music in that one as well?
Yeah, I use music a lot in my classes. So I teach two classes. One is on school and society. The other one is on language varieties and culture in the classroom. So for that one, I use music when we talk about, obviously, culture and our students' cultures, but also when we talk about African American vernacular English. I use a lot of music as well. I think it's more accessible for them to kind of understand how that works in practice. But then I do a lot with protest music too, I think, to show them, or not, I don't ever want to give my students this idea that like, yeah, all this terrible stuff is happening. There's all these systemic issues and people are just like taking it. I think music has been a really great way in American popular music to show resistance and to show what's going on. And so I always try to include that stuff for them. It's also just like a good relationship builder. At the start of every semester, I have them do like a journal where I'm like, what's your favorite song at the moment? And tell me why. And then I make a class playlist. So when they're doing work or we're having a break, I can like throw that playlist on. And today, like a Taylor Swift song came on and half the class was singing along to it. And like, I don't like Taylor Swift, but was it kind of cute? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, um, and I think that's the beauty, right? That huge Springsteen fan. I don't know if you've ever seen her being interviewed, where she talks about Bruce bringing his daughter to her show and coming backstage and signing her guitar and playing Dancing in the Dark to her, and she was thrilled. um I love that, because 2 years ago I started a new job, and the team really had a bad overall. They'd had strong managers, but the director had not been very good, and so they brought me in, and specifically, like, we're really looking to try to make sure that the team stays doing well. And so I met with every agent, and there were about 60 people, and so each one of them I asked a bunch of questions, and the very last question was, okay, um, our job, the company I work for, we do roadside assistance. So, people broke down, we go tow them for their RVs. I said, what's the one song, if you're on a road trip, that has to be on your playlist? And I got a little bit, I said, no, 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 just, one. If you have to have two, tell me. And um, I ended up making it a playlist, and I sent it out to everyone. I go, this is our CoachNet road trip playlist, and for that very reason. And it was amazing to see all the diversity and everyone's different music, but you got a sense of it because they do tell you, well, this song makes me feel alive, and you're bored and the road's kind of getting to you, and then you play this music and it's waking you up. And so I think that's a great way to break the ice and kind of learn about your class.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it's always fun because again, there is like such a wide array. I think people would expect, right? A group of one of my classes, for example, is like almost all freshmen, right? Like you would expect a group of freshmen to have these very kind of top 40 picks. And like, no, I mean, they're listening to indie stuff. I had students being like, I like Paul Simon. I had somebody put like early 2000s Black Eyed Peas. I was like, okay, sure. Like, I guess awesome. That's fine. So I think it's fun for them too, to see what their classmates are listening to. And it makes class less awkward. Like, I think most people, if they've been to college, like the first day or first few weeks or whatever, like it can be awkward when you're just like sitting there and it's silent.
Absolutely.
The music can really help create the mood that you want. So I love using music with my students.
Yeah. So talk some more about, you've already shared about Racing in the Street in Nebraska. What are some other favorite albums or songs that really have spoken to you?
So I think that for me, there's definitely like two branches. There's that branch of like introspective. I want to be kind of sad and like in my feelings. But then there is the other branch, just like I need a soundtrack for the adventures I'm having in my mid-20s. And the things that I'm doing with my friends. And so I think I always have some Bruce songs on playlists. This past summer, like I internshipped in New England, that was like a 15-hour drive there. And then I was up there going to the beach all the time and hiking, and me and my friends go camping, or we're going on vacation. And I've forced us to have Bruce songs. And typically, I mean, they're like Born to Run, right? Hungry Heart, Rosalita, right? These upbeat, lively songs. I also really love Bobby Jean from Born in the USA. Don't know why, but whenever that song comes on, I always smile. It's like one of my favorites. But I have those like key tracks on there. And if people are annoyed, they don't tell me. So which I'm going to assume you just like it if you don't say
exactly,
anything.
That's great. So what are the introspective, when you're ready to be alone in your thoughts, or when you're feeling a little down?
Yeah, I mean, I think I usually would go to I would say Nebraska for sure. I like some songs on the river, the river, the song, the river. But I think there's a lot of good ones on that as well. Darkness on the Edge of Town in general, that album I'll put on. That's definitely one like I play a lot on vinyl when I'm just like sitting at home chilling out. And I always joke about I'm on Fire. There's something about that song, and I've never really been able to like lay my finger on it, but I joke all the time that I'm like, oh, why do I need to go to therapy if I can just listen to I'm on Fire or, Dancing in the Dark, like on repeat for 3 hours. But it's just like, it's almost like comforting. That song, especially I'm on Fire, when I was graduating from college and about to move and transition, and COVID had just started. That song was just like it was like a comfort to me. And I think it's a more of an acoustic song on an album that's like not, Born in the USA is very upbeat. And so that one is definitely softer. And I think Bruce sings softly on it as well. And so I think that it was just like, it was very comforting to me.
What were and when you sent me, when you booked the thing, you had said you're mostly into 70s music. So, but have you sampled Letter to You, Western Stars, even Magic,
I really
Wrecking
liked
Ball?
Western Stars was probably one of the things that was like, oh, I need to go back and revisit all of his stuff.
Okay.
Western Stars was great. I think I was still in my phase when that album came out, where I was like, Bruce Springsteen, like, why do I want to listen to Bruce Springsteen?
Yeah.
And then, I listened to it, or I must have heard maybe on like, Spotify, make sure recommended playlists or whatever.
Yeah.
A song must have came on and I was like, and then I went back and listened to everything. And so after that, I think I started picking up his vinyl whenever I was out and about. But yeah, primarily I do listen to his 70s albums, but Western Stars might be the exception.
Okay, very well. There's nothing wrong with that. When it came out, I was like, God, there's no way we're going to get a tour, but I would love to have a tour. And then when they did the film where we got to see the barn and all the thing was just amazing. That's really cool. So did you pick up the No Nukes?
Yes.
Yes. What I thought was funny, Mackenzie, is we're so used to having little Steven and Niels and Patty and Susie, like, that core band looks so small compared to now.
Yes.
But they were so amazing.
Yeah. And I think, I think this was another thing that drew me in, was just the band. Because I think, again, like, you think Bruce Springsteen, people, I don't always know if people think about the E Street Band.
Right.
But especially when you're listening to those early albums, you're like, damn, like that's a band.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was funny just recently, as we're recording this, right, on Twitter, Ted Nugent was talking about that, Bruce was a piece of crap.
Yeah.
But he has a great band. And I was like, even when you're insulting him, you can't, you have to give props to the E Street Band. I said, that's just hilarious.
And I think, Clarence Clemens, like, I think I think he was someone like when I was watching live videos, right? Like, obviously I heard the sax when I was listening to it, and then you start watching these live concerts and you're like, I think that also gave me an appreciation, and they had such great chemistry on stage, for sure.
Yeah, he did. He loved them. Did you watch Springsteen on Broadway on Netflix?
I did. Yes. Okay. Multiple times.
Okay. Do you make friends and family watch that with you sometimes?
So, what's interesting is I think my mom, I don't ever remember her playing Bruce Springsteen like when I was a kid.
Right.
But when I was in my internship over the summer, and I remember she called me one day. She's like, I was listening to some of your records, and I was like, oh, okay. I was like, cool. Like, what'd you listen to? She's like, Bruce Springsteen. I said, oh, which one? She's like, some of them. And I was like, oh, okay. So she's been more into him now.
That's funny.
My uncle is a big Springsteen fan, which means his son is. My cousin, he's younger, he's 15. He loves 10th Avenue Freeze Out.
Yeah, sure.
He was last time I was over there, he comes up to me and he's like, do you know he has Down syndrome? Okay. Which he came up to me and he was like, hey, I was like, what's up, man? He's like, do you know who Bruce Springsteen is? And I was like, I do. And he was like, I love 10th Avenue Freeze Out. And I was like, absolutely.
That's great. That's just crossing all boundaries. That's wonderful. That's great. So I guess the question that, I usually ask, are there songs you're dying to hear live that you're chasing? I guess you want all of them, right?
Yes, all of them.
Yes.
I think for me, because I'm on Fire was like such an important song to me, and like especially during the pandemic was such a comfort. I think I would lose my mind if I ever heard that song live. I have like multiple live recordings of it on my computer, it's just not the same. So I would love to hear that. So that's probably the song I would like to hear live.
I have a theory that if you go to a pub or, a diner, someplace that has a guitarist, someone playing music, whether it's one or two people, and if you go to the tip jar and you throw your, $5 in there or whatever and say, hey, can you do Bruce Springsteen? Good chance they're going to do I'm on Fire.
I mean, that was one of the first songs I learned to play on guitar when I was like a teenager learning to screw around.
Yeah. And I think partly because, one, everyone knows it. Yeah. Two, it is a very complex yet simple song, right? And it's a short song. It, when you actually think about it, when you time it, it's just it, but it does paint this great mood and this feeling.
Yeah, it's a short song. It's only like 2.5 minutes, I think.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So what else should I have asked you, Mackenzie, that I haven't?
I think we're covering the bases.
Okay, we are.
I think so. I think for me, the big takeaway is always it's just so funny because I think people still have that like stereotype of Bruce Springsteen, even though I think in recent years he's been pretty like in your face, outspoken. I just remember, I think when we started listening to his albums with my friends, and I remember one of them being like, wait, so Born in the USA is a protest song, like in a text, like that's what they sent me. And I was like, yes. And she was like, wow.
I thought of that funny, when our former president was in the hospital with COVID, right? The people outside with their little red Trump song banners and all this other crap. They're playing Born in the USA, and I'm like, they understand?
No.
That they don't, this is just not a so I love telling this story. I had a fan on the show who loved Leonard Bernstein. That's her favorite musician. And she said Leonard Bernstein and Bruce Springsteen's both best known songs are their most misunderstood song. He said, Hallelujah is not a song that's appropriate to play like in a celebration. But, he said, but they all do. And Born in the USA should not be played when you're showing fireworks. But, hey, they do it. That's awesome.
I think she kept, and we kept going, and Streets of Philadelphia, right? We listened to that, and I was like explaining to her like the film, and she was like, wait. She's like, this song's about the AIDS crisis. I was like, yes. Well, I told you Bruce is woke.
When I have Bella Pori has been on the show multiple times, and she talked about that's how she got into Bruce. She she says as a lesbian, a lot of times she has to try to find meaning in songs to speak to her. And she said when she heard Streets of Philadelphia, she went, oh my goodness, he's speaking for me and others. And so and then now she's become this massive fan. And in fact, she would make the argument Western Stars is all about lesbian couples having problems. So that's great. What future plans do you have, Mackenzie? I know you're going to keep working on your master's, but what's next for you?
I graduate in May. So who knows? I've been applying to jobs. I have interviews lined up, so it should be fun. I don't have interest working in like a traditional school setting. So I'm looking at a lot of nonprofits, museums, things of that nature.
That's great. That fits your personality perfect. I get it. I do think you and your friend should record that when it's on Zoom and send it to me as a podcast. I will edit it and send it. I think I know my audience would love to hear that. Any final thoughts before we get to the Mary question?
No, I'm just, thank you for having me on. It's been fun. I never get to talk about Bruce. Everybody just is like, stop talking.
Mackenzie, I would be a very rich man if I had money for every time my guest has said that. Usually their significant other is like, please talk to someone else. All right. So let's speaking of teaching, Jay Armstrong is a recently retired honors English teacher. He has a brand new book out, Bedtime Stories for the Living. But when he was teaching, he would take his honors English class their senior year, and they would take 2 days to break apart Thunder Road. They would look at all the lyrics. They would talk about the imagery and the themes that Bruce explores. They would compare it to Robert Frost. And then at the end of the 2 days, Jay would ask the question, does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road? So Mackenzie, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car?
Hold on. I have never thought about it like that. Like in the like, oh. I think she doesn't.
Okay.
I don't think she does. I'm looking at the lyrics now.
That's okay. That's
as
fine.
a refresher, because I've never thought about it. And now there's like all the pressure. No, I don't think she did.
Why do you think she doesn't?
Because he's asking her to climb in at the end. He's like, oh, so you should climb in.
Yeah.
And I'm pulling out of here. And I think Mary said no.
You think she's too afraid?
I do. I think she's too afraid. She just graduated, This would be such a fun activity. Wow. That's the type of class I would like to take.
Just so you know, I ask this to end every episode, and about a year and a half ago, I collected about 20 or 30 answers and sent it to Jay. And I said, okay, because I always give him credit, and he actually listened to all the answers. And then we had an episode, him discussing people's answers.
Well, that sounds so cool.
Yeah, about 60-40, about 60% say she gets in, about 40% says she doesn't. So it isn't like it's 100% people like, oh yeah, of course. And every once in a while I get Mackenzie people, well, of course, it's Bruce Springsteen, you hop in the car. But a lot of people talk about that. No, he didn't make a good enough case, even though we love Thunder Road. She's afraid. She's afraid. And that's his story. He says, you making a choice means it's a leap of faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to give up something. Now, a couple of my favorite, and you quoted this earlier, is someone said, absolutely, she gets in the car because in racing in the street, when she's on her daddy's porch, that's the same porch.
Oh my gosh. Listen, give me like a week and I could construct a very well thought out paper.
Okay. Tell you what. All right,
point.
book it. All right, book it. We're going to do this. Email me when it's a good time and I will book it. And then we'll do that. We'll do a 2-part episode. We'll do this and then we're going to have coming back. I would love that. But right, think about that, right? Like they say she's on her daddy's porch. She danced across the porch. Holy shit. I can't believe I didn't make that connection.
Wow, now I am. This is gonna bother me. I'm gonna go back.
That's okay.
I'm gonna be like, ooh.
The other one that I loved is someone said that they get in the car, they drive to California, and Moonlight Motel is Mary has died and he's mourning her death after their life together.
Also, I like that too. Wow.
So, yeah.
Maybe I should just listen to his entire discography.
Next
time you'll see me, there'll be like a cork board in the back with all these strings.
All right. And I will, I'm going to end the podcast now. And then I'm going to, because I don't want to, my audience has already heard this story, so I'm not going to do it. So if someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
You can follow me on Twitter at MAC_attack 8881, or you can follow me on Instagram at mcrenshaw8.
Okay. And thank you, Mackenzie. This is absolutely great. I appreciate you so much. Listeners, go get vaccinated, go get boosted.
Yes.
Let's be good to each other because that's how we're going to get through this. Thank you, Mackenzie. We're going to book you a return trip, and we are going to spend the whole episode breaking down your theories on the Mary question. Listeners, be good, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.